my name is Sarah, and today we are going to have a little discussion about reading preferences, book snobbery, and the philosophy I like to call you read you. The inspiration for this discussion topic came a couple of months ago when I was on Facebook and a friend of mine posted a picture of a book that she had recently finished. It is a book that is much beloved here in the booktube community, and that is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. Now, normally I probably wouldn't have done much beyond like the picture and leave some sort of comment about how much I enjoyed Fangirl when I read it, and I hope that she enjoyed it too, and the like. But the thing that really caught my eye was the actual caption that this friend of mine gave in regard to the book that she had read. In 2016, she is doing the Pop Sugar 2016 Reading Challenge, and one of the things for this year's challenge was to read a YA contemporary or a YA romance or something like that. I don't remember specifically which one it was. And in addition to putting the particular topic that this book fulfilled for the challenge, she also just put a little note about her reading experience. And the thing that she said was that YA contemporary or YA romance is a secret guilty pleasure of hers. And as soon as I read that comment, I had this thought of, why? Why does it have to be secret? Why does it have to be a guilty pleasure? Why can't you just read the books that you love to read and be unapologetic about the kinds of stories that you enjoy, regardless of whether they are serious literature or fluffy literature or fun literature? You just read the books that you want to read. This particular instance got me thinking about a topic that I had sort of been mulling over really since before I joined the booktube community. And that is this thought process of book snobbery. And it is because I started to notice in myself a somewhat subconscious and unintended bias toward different kinds of literature. I had this subconscious thought process that certain kinds of books like literary fiction or classics or whatever were better for me to read than other books that maybe fall in the contemporary or romance genres or in YA or even fantasy and things like that. And I started thinking about that subconscious bias and asking myself, where had this come from? Where had this thought process that reading this kind of literature is better than reading this kind of literature, and that this kind of literature has more to give me than this kind of literature does? And the more that I have thought about it, I have come to the possibly erroneous, but I'm pretty sure it's fairly accurate conclusion that it is because the bookish community, those of us that are part of BookTube or Bookstagram or book blogging, and even those who are not actively involved in those kinds in any way, but really are just book lovers, bibliophiles, people for whom reading is a huge part of their life. We tend, as a community, to have a different perspective on reading and books in general and reading preferences than the non-bookish community. If you are sitting in a public place like on the subway or at a Starbucks or something like that, and you are reading a book and someone sees you reading that book, if they see you reading a classic like Pride and Prejudice or Jane Eyre or David Copperfield or A Tale of Two Cities or something like that, they're probably going to think, wow, that's really impressive that they're reading this book. And even I, as a part of the bookish community, tend to have that thought process. If I see someone reading a piece of classic literature, I'm like, wow, that's great, that's awesome that they're reading that book. But if you were to see someone on the metro, on the subway, in Starbucks, whatever, reading a book titled something like Fangirl or Anna and the French Kiss, those people would probably have a different response to it. They're probably not going to be as impressed as if someone was reading a piece of classic literature or a piece of more serious literature or whatever. And as I realized this, as I realized that even I do this to myself as I'm reading books and to other people when I see them reading books, I was like, why is this a thing? Like, why do I have this unintended subconscious bias? Why does our culture have this subconscious, maybe even conscious bias? Why does it seem that most of our culture, even if they don't read books on a regular basis, are book snobs? That they have this perception that these kinds of literature are better to read than these kinds of literature. This whole thing just got me thinking about reading preferences in general. And I will just say, I will always be an advocate for reading broadly. I will always be an advocate for reading broadly as far as genre is concerned, as far as authors are concerned, as far as ethnicity of authors, as far as diversity of location and character and everything possible. I personally believe it is important to try to read as broadly as possible. And yes, you are always going to have those particular genres that you gravitate toward and that you love, but I think it's really important to push yourself outside of your comfort zone and not just read the same kinds of stories over and over and over again. That being said though, your reading preferences are your reading preferences. No one genre of literature is by default better than another genre of literature. And for those of you who are in the bookish community and are part of the booktube community, I'm sure you're like, well, duh. But I don't think we always think about that. Like I said, I even had this subconscious bias of my own that certain kinds of books were better for me to be reading than other books, and that people would be more impressed if I'm reading this book versus this other book. But the thing that it made me realize and that I've been thinking about and trying to remind myself over the last several months is that all kinds of literature is wonderful. All kinds of literature, all genres of literature put beautiful stories forth into the world, and beautiful characters and wonderful themes and incredible life lessons, and that all genres of literature have stories that make their mark on society and impact generations and individuals and the like. And that is not to say that every single book written by every person in every genre of literature is a good thing. There are certain books that are incredibly problematic with their themes and the relationships and general situations that they portray, and there are certain genres that I think are more prone to problematic things than others, just based on the tropes that tend to pop up in specific genres of literature. But that doesn't mean that the whole batch is bad. It doesn't mean that because there's one erotica book or one YA fantasy book or one YA contemporary or even one historical fiction or one crime novel or whatever that has problematic themes that they're all terrible. And it doesn't make that whole genre by default a worse genre of literature for you to read. So really, this is just, I guess, a reminder to myself and an encouragement to those that are in the bookish community, and then also an encouragement to those who are not really part of the bookish community, that reading is reading and all reading is a good thing. And if you prefer historical fiction or fantasy or sci-fi or contemporary, if you read broadly or if you tend to stick to one or two or three different genres, you read you. At the end of the day, I do believe that reading has some really important things that it can teach us. Part of the reason that I intentionally read broadly and diversely is so that I can intentionally expose myself to characters and situations and circumstances that I, as a straight white woman living in the United States, will never experience. But also, at the end of the day, I believe that reading should be, for the most part, an enjoyable thing. Yes, I do believe that it is sometimes important to read books that make you uncomfortable because they expose you to different situations and circumstances that are uncomfortable but that are important to learn about. But again, at the end of the day, reading should be, for the most part, an enjoyable experience. It should not be a chore. It should not be something that you do to impress other people or whatever. You should read because you enjoy to read. You should read the books that you want to read because you want to read those books, not because you're supposed to, or because someone told you that you should, or because you think it's going to impress someone, or whatever. So really, at the end of the day, you read you. You read the things that touch your heart, that make you happy, that challenge you, that encourage you, that make you laugh and cry and excited and all of those things. But don't read the things you think you should read or the things that you think you're supposed to read. You read what you want to read because you want to read it. Well, there you have it, friends. Those are my probably very rambly thoughts on reading preferences, book snobbery, you read you, all that jazz. I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Have you noticed that you have this sort of subconscious bias toward different kinds of literature? Do you have any personal experiences with that kind of thing? Or have you been in situations before where you've had that secret guilty pleasure that you don't like to tell people you like to read this kind of book or whatever because of some perception you think it's going to make them have of you or whatever? Any and all thoughts on this general topic, I would love to hear them and get a great discussion going in the comments below. If you want to follow me elsewhere online, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads, all at Sarah Ann Hayes. The links for those profiles will be in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye! Hello, friends. My name... Today we are going to have a little discussion about things relating to books. Something. Yeah. Alright, let's try that again.